Welcome back to Allegedly. I'm Taylor.
And I am Joseph.
You might notice today we're recording a little differently. Joe is a little under the weather, but we're making it happen anyways.
Yeah, extreme social distancing, a leftover relic from the COVID era. I did not get
And to
vaccinated.
think that whole thing was a hoax. I mean,
Yeah, I'm proud of
yeah,
myself. I never took any of the experimental squish.
it's good.
Yeah,
I'm always I had to it was either take them or get fired from my job. So I took the two first vaccines. But I remember I never took, I feel fine, but I never took the
yeah.
boosters. And I remember I went to an event and my brother was there with his girlfriend and they were like checking for booster cards. And I was like, I didn't take it. And the cognitive dissonance on her face, I mean, she whipped around. She was like, You didn't take the booster? I'm like,
I
Brother, this
I
girl's
I
gone.
forgot. I forgot that people would even get if you weren't even up to date on your boosters, like it was like your persona non grata. Like I dealt
Hmm.
with I dealt with some pretty extreme effects for my conscientious um rejection and refusal to participate in that whole fiasco. But speaking of fiascos, um deep deep underground government involvement. We've previously spoke about this on some of at least one or two other episodes, or at least in reference to Project Looking Glass, which
Mm.
is going to be a springboard for a few things that we want to touch on in this week's episode. Um, so, for those who don't know or just want a refresher, Project Looking Glass is a purported secret government program investigating time travel, Stargate technology, and methods for viewing probable future events through artificially induced phenomena. And that's one of the most well um, documented and spoken about. There's a very long interview with this whistleblower. Even one of the short segments from it, I think, is like what 15 plus minutes long, and that's the most quoted one. We've referenced it in a previous podcast.
Yep.
Essentially, what is purported to have been going on is that the government unlocked um, some sort of advanced technology through reverse engineering of either or extraterrestrial technology or ancient uncovered technology. And to harken back to our previous episode, to things like the Anunnaki and the ancient Sumerians and Babylonians. Um, I didn't know this until recently, but research and development were reportedly influenced by ancient Sumerian cylinder seals,
Mm.
which were said to encode plans for constructing those kinds of devices, which is essentially like purporting that you have guys like who does the ancient apocalypse, the older sort of anthropologist guy who talks about how there were significantly advanced civilizations in our history. But a lot of the evidence was erased during the Younger Dryas period. Um, but yeah,
And
there's. Mhm.
I would just add a lot of these devices, people claim they are begotten from demonic seances or they are acquired from astral beings or Anunnaki, things like that.
Yes.
I'm finding that at the basis of all this Antiquitech or Project Looking Glass stuff is some sort of quantum device that allows the user to engage with the quantum field, with the informational field in
Hmm.
a non-local way.
Yeah. It also seems as though, and you and I were having a little bit of a discussion about this, how what you could call separation, like the individuation of consciousness is like sort of just a way that the universe experiences itself, and like, I mean, even on a fairly physical level, you could just look at the whole universe and be like, well, it's all part of the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I've heard that like a lot of this stuff, it's like if you see like a ghost or a UFO, especially if they're not like a craft style, it's actually like you interacting with yourself from the past or the future. Because
Mm-hmm.
also, if you take this idea that we were not only um, we're not only going to be far more advanced than we are today in the future, but also there are past iterations of civilizations that were highly technologically advanced in the past. These could be some sort of like space-time waves where you are constantly interacting with versions of your consciousness on the timeline from both
Hmm.
directions. And I mean, there have even been discoveries that say, and I've even tried to use this, I don't really know what I'm doing, but you can actually communicate with your past self, and this sort of like perfect prophetic tense of that they use in like stuff like the Bible, where they're talking about future events as if they have happened in the past
Mm.
already. Like this
Mm.
is not to come, this is done.
Well,
Um,
Bible says there's nothing new under the sun,
yeah. Mm.
right?
And transurfing.
Hmm.
Um, but it's one of those things where you can actually, and I've kind of felt like I've formed some sort of a bridge. It's tentative, but like you can actually communicate with yourself non-temporally. So if I've done stuff where like I've just remembered events that have happened to me in the past that were concerning, and I've tried to like offer psychic comfort to myself in the past, or like try to nudge myself in a certain direction, where
Mm.
if you start engaging in this and you make it a habit, that means your future self, it can then, it gives you the opportunity to start interacting with your past self. And I think basically what this technology is this, but on a quantum and technological and universal or world level scale, where
Hmm.
they're activating this technology of potentiality and putting in variables and trying to figure out what, you know, if this, then that. If we do X, Y, and Z, how will that, what will that do? Or if we want to end up at a certain outcome, what are the variables we need to plug in prior to make that more likely to happen? Now, as the whistleblower on this,
Just to be clear for the audience, this is the looking glass technology. It's
yeah,
to evaluate probability of outcomes on sort of a meta scale. How does humanity respond if we go this direction or that direction? This is helpful for the cabal, so to speak.
yeah. For anybody that has interest in controlling um, people, nations, resources, long term, etc. Now, the interesting part that this whistleblower said is that there was like a certain like cutoff or a wall that they used to be able to use the technology to um, relatively easily influence a future event, cause it to happen, or at least, get an idea of the likelihood of something happening if, you know, other variables were involved. It seemed as though there was some sort of quantum or computational wall at a certain date. Now, Taylor, you and I have talked about this. You think that 2012 in on our calendar could potentially be either sooner or later than the 2012 that they
The,
talk about.
sort of, yes. The 2012, so mine said 2012 was the end of the world, but it's actually our 2030. Um, 2030 also marks the end of the age of Aquarius, which is what we're in, characterized by enlightenment and revolutionary spirit. Both the French Revolution and the American Revolution both occurred in the age of Aquarius. It's like the fourth turning, too. History moves in four turnings across 80 years, 20 years each. And I think I'll let you finish what the
Mhm.
guy, the whistleblower, talked about, but I think all those things are in some way or another talking about the same phenomena here,
Yeah.
which is humanity in some way raising its consciousness in a way that is simply untenable for to control for those looking to exert that sort of control.
Yes. And what's interesting, and the reason I bring up that date in particular, is that at that date, whatever it may be on our calendar, pardon me. Sorry, this is why we are not in person today. I am getting over a little bit of a thing. So essentially, um, the technology didn't really function properly after that date, whatever that date may be. Um, Meaning that like they could no longer use it to reliably find a way to influence events in a certain direction, or reverse engineer that, put in a an event and say what if we do X, Y, and Z, what's going to happen? What are the probable outcomes from doing this, and that? So it essentially um, led to the belief in some sort of a singularity or a rising of consciousness where basically it relies on people being able to be blindly manipulated, led, etc., or accept sort of subliminal programming in a way, or as we've both talked about. I don't know if we've mentioned this on the show, but like it seems if you're somewhat aware of the occult or the esoteric or the cabal or the elites, it seems as though they need to put their goals or their plans in plain sight to at least um, garner the illusion of getting consent or it's part of the spell of getting these things to come to fruition. Uh, d- can you expand on that at all? Do you know anything about that? Are you familiar with this
Yeah.
method?
Yeah, I am. I forget what the law is called. There's a certain law for that people speculate. What I actually believe it is, though, people talk about how the Simpsons predict all these events. It's mathematically impossible.
Hmm.
They're invoking a 33rd degree Freemasonic principle called predictive programming, where in showing us what they're going to do, they're not actually they're showing us so it can plant in your subconscious and you basically effectively manifest it. That's what these things are.
Yeah.
When Simpsons showed Trump coming down in the elevator, it's they're not showing us what they're going to do. They're trying to plant the seed for that to happen in our subconscious because we have all the power. Reality is a holographic three-dimensional projection of the subconscious. An awakening, I think, is associated with being more discerning and mindful of the music you consume, of the media you consume, of the types of movies you consume that induce a certain emotional state of like anxiety or fear, where your subconscious is more ripe to be programmed. I think that is really the biggest, because the first step of this, right? Carl Jung said, "That which we fail to bring a name to remains invisible, controls our life, and we call it fate." So, in bringing a name to some of these things we're inundated with,
Hmm.
you're more readily able to fortify yourself against those and effectively, thwart whatever mechanism is trying to hijack the power of your subconscious. That's my feeling.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And oh, I've uh, I've posited something similar where it seems far more likely that instead of having some writer that's cued in to like all these hyper specific future events, and I don't think it's just The Simpsons. The Simpsons is just so long running and so popular that it
Mm-hmm.
just gets to more eyes. It makes
Mm-hmm.
these things more likely to manifest in that way. But there's a lot of different, and not just shows, but it goes back to, any type of media that can interact with consciousness, especially fiction. That Baron Trump book, where
Mm-hmm.
like if you, I have said this over and over, as soon as somebody imagines a reality, whether it's a fantasy or sci-fi or whatever, you've just branched that reality into existence somewhere in the waveform of the multiverse. So the closer it is to be able to kind of fit in to our reality, and the more people interface with it, the more likely that makes it to be able to manifest as something that's a real true event. And this
Totally
goes,
agree.
I think it goes for events. I think it goes for technology. Um, I think it even goes for people. So with this, I want to kind of highlight how this lines up with some of these soft disclosures that we've been getting from our government relatively recently. First of all, I mean, if you've ever heard of I think it was very crassly named, but also very funnily named, the Jewish space lasers. That whole conspiracy theory,
Marjorie Taylor Greene.
yeah, directed energy weapons. I forgot they were actual Congress people. Fucking. But yeah, the Department of War, their official Twitter, and I'm sure other places as well, just released this last week. Yes, the Department of War has directed energy weapons. Yes, we are scaling them. And then it has this picture in like, black and red, light speed lethality, directed energy dominant, and it has like what looks like some sort of an observatory or like a mounted weapon on some sort of a deck, firing a thick laser out of the front of it. Um, so
Bat
this
beam.
it's just it's hard. It's almost hard to be a conspiracy theorist these days because you're just right all the time. And then they're like,
Hmm.
"Yeah, you're so right. We're actually doing it, and we're doing it crazier than you
Right.
could have even
That's a great
imagined."
idea. Yeah. Well, that's a great idea. We should burn up more cities with lasers.
And I wonder too if this is another one of those things where even the conspiracy theories might not even be as real until they're said out loud. And then multiple people repeat them, and then either someone from a department looks at them and like, "Can we do that? Can we make it a real thing?" Or it just sort of, well,
Energetically manifest as above, so
yeah,
below. I mean, these things. I think these conspiracy theories are derived from real evidence. It's more open source intelligence analysis, I feel, than
yeah,
conspiracy theory.
it's
Which, by
like
the way, conspiracy
coherence.
theory was only introduced in the American lexicon after the Warren Commission came out with the JFK magic bullet theory, when Americans were like, "Hey, this whole thing doesn't really make a lot of sense."
Yeah.
New York Times, Project Mockingbird uses the word conspiracy theory 6 times in the weeks that followed.
So, and then I just I want to also highlight the snippet from the White House. It's from a larger press release, but once again, it says we are capable of so much more. Our technologies permit us to manipulate time and space. They leave distance annihilated, cause things to grow, and improve productivity. Now, that is stunning, shocking,
Yeah.
and almost a little disturbing because
Well, that's a soft disclosure.
and it's like, well, okay, why am I still pumping fucking gasoline into my car? Why am I even charging a Tesla
Right.
with electricity from a coal-fired power plant? Why am I paying for electricity? It's like, why if that's the case, I'm mad now. I'm upset.
Yes.
Help
Here's
us.
the. I agree. Like, there's actually no need for oil because they're pulling energy from the ether.
Mm,
They figured out how to harness the power of the ether, which is on the periodic table till 1948. It's in older versions of Encyclopedia Britannica.
mhm.
AETHER. It's the invisible. Space isn't a vacuum. It's full of energetic potential. The problem is if everyone were to get a free energy device for their home, it has a dual use as a weapon that could literally,
Hmm.
create a wormhole and just suck New York City up.
Yeah, but I mean that I feel like that's the same thing as like if everybody got a nuclear power plant in their home.
Yeah,
But we can still use nuclear power to distribute energy, right? Like
right.
there's
I
got to
agree. Like,
be a way to reliably and safely distribute
yes.
this to benefit, people who shouldn't just be directly handling the raw
Yeah.
technology
I
itself.
think with these programs, I totally agree. I think the fear of the people who have the technology is if we make it for civilian use, commercial use, then there will be departments at universities dedicated to the study of this technology, and it'll proliferate. Like the days right now, they have it totally gate kept, and they
Yeah.
want to keep it that way. Even just a little bit of commercial use
Yeah.
will proliferate it.
And I think I'm sure that certain other nation states have similar access, but also it could be another thing of where, we are still very much not at even a level of amicability in geopolitics worldwide. So it could definitely be a case too of, all right, we need to maybe in the sense of keeping this from our enemies who would definitely have no problem using this against us full scale. Keep this as under wraps as possible and also perfect it as much as possible because we also don't know how much they have already as well. Sort of
Yep.
like a silent, not only a cold war, but like a dark war, a very very um like insidious and secretive cold war that's happening with black projects in all these different major powers,
I
China,
think you're
Russia,
spot on, Joe.
the
And I
US.
think this actually would be an appropriate segue.
Yeah.
Um, into evidently an application or use of this technology in a way that was meant to sort of big dick China in this case. So
Okay.
for those listening, and by the way, if you're enjoying the podcast, please like, subscribe, share with friends. Helps the show a lot.
Yeah.
So you all may remember the disappearance of flight MH370, Malaysian Airlines flight 370. Disappeared over the Indian Ocean. This was in 2014. And it sort of became the greatest aviation mystery of the 21st century. You had this Boeing 777 flying over, I think it was going from Indonesia to somewhere else. It was over Asia, the Asia Pacific. And the flight disappeared, completely disappeared off the blip of a map. And there was no black box recovered. There was allegedly a part of the tail of the plane that was recovered on the western part of Africa, which analysis showed doesn't really make sense that the material flowed that way. They came out with a Netflix documentary about it, trying to explain the disappearance with the pilot's sort of flight simulator and the weird routes he was taking there. For a while, people were confused. How did this flight disappear? Now, information began to coalesce in 2023, and I'll get to that in a moment. But first, a couple facts about the disappearance of Malaysia Air that should have all of your eyebrows raising. The first is that in Beijing, relatives of the 153 Chinese passengers, and this is reported by Beijing News, claimed that up to 4 hours after the alleged crash, they were calling their loved ones and their phones were ringing out for 4 hours. That wouldn't happen if a plane was submerged. The phones would be dead. They wouldn't be ringing out like that.
Yeah.
That's the first thing. The other thing that was conveniently left out by the media when reporting on this is there were, I think, 10 Chinese semiconductor engineers aboard that flight. And they were allegedly defecting to China. And so this begins to set the stage for what I'm about to tell you guys about. Okay. You have this flight lifting off with Beijing semiconductor engineers allegedly defecting to China. If you are a country like the United States and you know that Chinese intelligence is watching that flight and tracking it because they have obviously a lot of intelligence on board, right? A lot of sensitive material held by high value individuals that they want to get safely to China.
Mm-hmm.
This is when allegedly the U.S. flexed and sort of big dick China and was like, there's nothing you can do about this, okay? Because what they did, according to these videos, so there were these videos on Reddit that surfaced in 2023, and we'll put them up for people. And what they depicted was a signal intelligence. So there are branches of military intelligence called signal intelligence. These are the people in charge of satellites, radars, anything that can pick up communications. You may have seen those military bases in Australia or Argentina with those big bulbous radar looking things. It's just a whole field of them.
Yeah.
Right. You're not allowed to use your cell phone within 50 miles of the place because they're that sensitive. Okay.
Wow.
In 2023, there were a couple videos that resurfaced rather, showing a signal intelligence satellite view, thermal and regular, of a Boeing 777 with the proper coordinates over the Pacific, above actually a CIA military outpost called Diego Garcia. We'll get to that in a second. And what the video purports to show is the plane is flying along, and there's a big heat signature coming from the cockpit. Now, just on a quick aside, there's a reason why you're not allowed to bring lithium batteries on an airplane, because they're incredibly flammable, okay? If the CIA, this is something they've done before, if the CIA wants to down an airplane, what they'll do is they'll either, reorganize TSA schedules or put their own people there so they can basically facilitate the movement of a pallet of lithium-ion batteries onto the plane and critically under the nose of the plane where the avionics sit. And then mid-flight, if you light that pallet of lithium-ion batteries on fire, the avionics become all screwed up. So that's what explains the heat signature in that satellite video and the erratic flight path of the airplane, because the avionics were down because they were on fire. So you have this plane flying through, and all of a sudden, 3 orbs, they look to be plasma, these ball orbs, begin circling the plane in like a geometric unison, and they circle it, and circle it and circle it and start going really fast. And then boom, all of a sudden there's a vacuum of cold air and almost like a portal that's created. I know this sounds fucking tinfoil hat stuff, but then the plane disappears.
Yeah.
Ashton Forbes, you guys should all go look him up. He's this guy on Twitter
Love him.
who's
He's
like
great.
great,
Super detailed.
super knowledgeable on all this. He's totally explained the whole thing, and no one's been able to counter him. What's interesting is the company that manufactures that satellite took that off their website after it did their debunking video. So he found the model of the satellite. The other thing, people were saying the clouds in that video were artifacts used in After Effects from this repository of After Effects artifacts or elements from like 2012. Well, if you go in the way back machine, you can see that in 2012, those clouds weren't actually there, and they were retroactively placed there in 2024. So then, detractors on Twitter could be like, well, look at that, right? Those very same elements were in that repository. Lie. The last thing about this,
they were added. It basically,
they were added.
Like someone took them from that original media, added them to this repository, and then tried to say, "Oh no, this is a special effects element," when really it only was added after that video, so it could not have been used in that video because they were the actual lifespan of them. They had only been around since after that video was released.
That's correct.
Wow.
That's exactly right. And Diego Garcia is a signal intelligence outpost in the Pacific, very small island, it's the furthest most point in the Pacific, way past Hawaii.
Oh, wow.
That's where signal intelligence is based.
There
was a photo posted on 4chan of Philip Wood, who was an IBM executive on that flight. IBM's deep in the semiconductors, of course.
Yeah.
And the photo posted was him in a holding cell that looked to be on Diego Garcia. So alarm bells immediately went off for people because the metadata of that photo somehow tied it to Diego Garcia, and he was on that flight. Exactly where the coordinates of that satellite lined up, and that would make sense that the flight was somehow transported to Diego Garcia because the phones were ringing out for 4 hours after.
Whoa.
And you know who was charged with leaking the videos? Edward Lynn. He was an admiral, I believe, a lieutenant commander, a U.S. Navy officer stationed on Diego Garcia, signal intelligence officer, court-martialed for releasing sensitive video information in 2014. And the timelines work out perfectly. He was a specialist in EP-3E Ares 2 signals intelligence aircraft, the very planes used to track radar and communication signatures in the Pacific. He was court-martialed in 2016 for mishandling classified information and failing to report foreign contacts, specifically with Taiwan and China. And so he was court-martialed. They ended up dropping the charges because, of course, you bring things for discovery and the whole thing falls apart. So he's actually living under a fake name, I think in Nebraska or South Dakota, and Ashton Forbes found him and tried to contact him.
No way.
And he was immediately like, don't talk to me.
So
we'll put that video up for people. But that was an example, I think, of the use of this technology that literally bends space-time.
Yeah.
We know, theoretically, things like wormholes are possible. They make physical sense.
Yeah.
The missing ingredient, dude, is the plasma. And think about our conception of plasma growing up, right? In elementary school, you put your hand on that little sphere and the plasma, whatever electricity hits your hand.
Yeah.
It was marginalized as like, okay, it's the fourth state of matter, but it has no real practical application.
Yeah. The only other time I heard about it was like plasma screen TVs, which were pretty short-lived as well.
Exactly. It's the key to all of this. And so I'll pause there for a second. I want to finish up. I want to hear your thoughts, but I have some patents I want to read from Salvatore Pius.
Please do.
And he's a PhD in mechanical and aerospace engineering from Case Western Reserve. And his doctoral thesis was titled Bubble Generation in a Continuous Liquid Flow Under Reduced Gravity Conditions. He is credited with filing 19 patents for military intelligence, for plasma tech, for gravitational propulsion stuff, for the use of centrifugal mercury to create gravitational fields. I mean, he's doing the wizardry stuff that results in exactly what we saw with MH370.
Yeah, that's uh, and these are real patents. So, what are some of the more wild ones?
So let's see. Electromagnetic field generator described a shell embedded with piezoelectric materials like quartz that spins at high speeds to create an impenetrable defensive shield against missiles and other threats. Uh, Craft using inertial mass reduction device describes a hybrid aerospace underwater craft that uses a resonant cavity and microwave emitters to create a local polarized vacuum, theoretically reducing its inertial mass to move at extreme speeds. This is why we see those craft that can move what seems like a million miles per hour and stop on a dime, and the occupants inside the craft are unaffected. Well, the third one I'll read: high frequency gravitational wave generator, a device intended to generate high-frequency gravitational waves by vibrating a gas-filled shell, potentially for communication or propulsion.
That's it sounds fanciful. It sounds like too fantastic.
Dude, there were those videos in Iraq of like, I'll put it on the podcast if I can find it, of literally these troops filming from their tanks, and you see a craft go up above an Iraqi village and
Mhm.
just pulses, and the whole village blows up. It just like pulses something,
Oh my God.
gone. We've been using this stuff for a
And that
while,
that lends credence to like why they would go for the Gilgamesh tomb in Iraq,
for sure.
probably to recover not only the body, but I'm sure they're like, what tech could possibly be buried with him if, supposedly the looking glass was um, derived from the first principles of this stuff found on ancient Sumerian cylinders.
Absolutely. Yeah, this stuff is, you know, disclosure will happen. I have faith. Like we saw this, that statement the White House put out. Our adversaries are reading that stuff diligently. Okay. And they are not looking at it and thinking, well, that's just a cute turn of phrase.
But before we wrap up, Trump literally called the technology we used in Venezuela, he referred to it as the discombobulator.
Yeah.
And there were even stories, I think that was more for the technology, but there were even stories of these guys getting hit with something where they couldn't hear properly, they couldn't even function properly. They like their ears were ringing, they were puking, blood was coming out of their nose. It completely
Yep.
made them like as if they were getting hit by like a beam from a superhero.
Dude, this is Havana syndrome. Like, if you remember Havana syndrome in
Hmm.
Cuba, like our intelligence operatives reported vertigo and
Yeah.
headaches and traumatic brain injuries. That's what this was. It was some sort of microwave device that pulses a microwave beam, and you can do a lot of stuff with this. You can put sound in people's heads. You can heat up their skin. We use this for crowd control domestically, or like this one, you can induce vertigo. And yeah, blood was coming out of their ears, blood was coming out of their nose. They were totally incapacitated, and that's what allowed those 20 Delta guys to walk in with, there were 200 Cuban and Venezuelan defense operatives there. We just
Yeah.
walked right through.
So I hate to cut this short, but Zoom might be cutting us off any second now.
All right.
But I feel like we hit all the topics we wanted to. This might just end very abruptly. Thank you guys for listening. Um, I feel like I'm about to get exploded by a goy beam right now.
Blood just starts going